Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark again with the Age of Fission radio show. I hope our call comes out okay today. The Skype signal here is a little bit weak on my end, but hopefully you'll be able to hear it correctly. As you know, today is Wednesdays, and on Wednesdays we do activist interviews. We have the great honor of having Donna Gilmore with us again, and her little dog, to talk about what is going on down in San Onofre, California, and other events that she understands about. So good morning, Donna. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I have a lot of important information to share for anybody that's concerned about potential radiation accident in the United States.
Well, great. Well, I would encourage our listeners to get a pencil and paper because I'm sure you'll be giving them lots of information and contacts and information that they can do to get active, because that's really what we need is people to take action. So what's the first thing that you'd like to discuss with people? What's the biggest thing on your mind?
Well, I think this is something that not many people know, even people that have spent years studying this. The nuclear waste in the United States from all the reactors, when it goes into dry storage, it's stored in normally half-inch thick stainless steel containers that the NRC has reported could have through-wall cracks 16 years after it has corrosion and cracking.
Wow.
And
how long has it been stored in those half-inch containers? Like how long have
the longest any canister has been stored is about 20 years. Most of them have been installed. We're talking about the thin canisters. There's two types. There's a thin canister and there's a thick cask. The thin canisters, they've been stored. Most of them are maybe 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, in that range. There's a few that have been in use for 20 years. But what has to happen first is there has to be corrosion that breaks the thin film on the stainless. And once that happens, then the crack can start and it will continue to grow unabated. And like I said, it will take about 16 years and it'll go through the wall. And the shocking part is, what's even worse, is the NRC has admitted they have no way to inspect to know if it's cracking or how deep the cracks are.
You're kidding. So they don't have any idea how deep the cracks are now. Who do you think that who made these decisions? Like, how did this start where they didn't take more care and safety on demanding a better quality product? Like, how long?
Here's what happened. Initially, in the United States, and what still happens in the rest of the world, is they use thick metal casts. Instead of a half inch, they're 10 inches to 20 inches thick.
Wow.
And they have double bolted lids, double seals. They're maintainable. They don't crack. It's only stainless steel that has this stress corrosion cracking where the cracks can continue to grow. The thick casts, they're maintainable. You can visually see the outside of them. The thin canisters, because they don't protect from a lot of radiation like gamma and neutrons, they have to store the thin canisters in these thick concrete overpacks. So it looks like you have this big concrete massive structure the waste is stored in. What they don't tell you is there's air vents in the concrete that they have to have in order for all the nuclear waste to spend fuel in the thin canisters to let off heat. So they really, if there's a through-wall crack in that thin canister, it's a convection process. It will actually help distribute the radioactive gases out of the canister. And how this happened is the U.S. originally used the thick cast, and then one of the vendors came up with this idea that was going to save them money, is to put it in these thin canisters, and they're welded shut. The intention was never to have them be a long-term solution. They thought Yucca Mountain would be ready, and plus the nuclear industry seems to have unsubstantiated hope that nothing will ever go wrong.
Right. Well, they operate on that all the time, the unsubstantiated hope.
Yeah, this is what I have discovered. When I originally got involved in nuclear issues, which really has only been a few years for me, I made a lot of assumptions that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was doing their job, and they were making sure that the nuclear industry and utilities were doing things safely. And I made the assumption that the utilities, the fact that the consequences are so dramatic and so just unfathomable, that they would be rewarding employees for finding safety problems, and that they would have a lot of redundancies, and they get the best pay and the best people. That is what I thought.
I'm sure I did too. Most Americans do still think that, actually.
Yes, I know. So I haven't been involved in this long enough to know that, and I think of myself as an intelligent person, but you don't read about this stuff in the newspaper about what's going on at nuclear plants. It's pretty much hidden unless you go looking. I mean, there's a lot of information on the internet you can find now.
Right.
But unless you're looking for it, I mean, I had no interest in nuclear waste. I mean, that was nothing that interested me, so I never looked into it. So I was fooled. And then we were told that we have to have nuclear energy. We have to live with this risk because we have no choice. And I never looked further than that claim, which is a bad on me, but I found out in California, we have a 40% surplus of energy without the two nuclear plants we had running. Now we're down to one nuclear plant. No, I'm not. And yes, and the data came from the Public Utility Commission here in California. Yes, the demand. Yes.
Wow. And they are not even, I'm speechless. I have to say I am speechless. Considering the problems we've had with San Onofre and Diablo Canyon, the known problems, and to compile that with a 40% surplus, and then to resist shutting those plants down, that makes it even more unconscionable. Yes,
and when I spoke to the governor's office about, after San Onofre was shut down, and that's a whole other topic, but after San Onofre was shut down, San Onofre was the only one that the California regulators and maybe the governor's office too believed that it was critical to keep Southern California's lights on. They thought it was critical, and that there might be brownouts or horrible things happen. But from the research I did, I knew that wasn't true. And there's these things called transmission zones where they claim that there wasn't enough energy in our transmission area, this pocket. So that was another issue. Well, that turned out to be a myth also. But when San Onofre finally shut down based on its own installing new steam generators that they redesigned and they made a bad design. It turns out to be a multi-billion-dollar bad design, and they knew these steam generators that the design probably wasn't going to work, and they installed them anyway. So that and the activists brought that to the attention of the right people and the public and everything. Anyway, ultimately it was shut down for that reason.
Uh-huh.
And we've not had blackouts or brownouts or anything, so it's a big myth. And Diablo, they admitted it wasn't critical to our electric grid here. And I met with the governor's office after San Onofre was shut down, and I said, well, what about Diablo? We don't need it for the grid,
Yeah.
And he knew that. And he said, well, that's, 2,400 megawatts of carbon-free energy, that they're all worried about the greenhouse, greenhouse gas issue.
Don't you find it unconscionable that they talk about it, carbon-free green energy, when they don't talk about the uranium mining, don't talk about the transportation of the uranium mining, the harm that the uranium mining causes to actually be able to run these nuclear plants?
Well, here's what I've learned in dealing with the offices of these elected officials and regulators. You're listening to the wrong people. They're believing the wrong people. They're believing that they can safely manage these plants. So they're willing to take the risk. They really think that these companies are confident enough and the technology is together enough that they're going to be okay. So they are willing to live with the risk for their agenda. And I find this all over. I mean, we have to be able to have credibility and get access to the decision makers. And we need to be able to have, written credible evidence to show that they've been lied to and misled about the facts of the situation. And now that's not an easy challenge. I'm not a nuclear engineer. I'm not a materials engineer. I'm a retired IT person, a systems analyst, and I do management when I retired. So that's my background. But my systems analysis and research and design and working on systems that had to be redundant and critical systems that had to be up 24/7. That's given me, and dealing with management and political types and all that, my background has helped me in what I'm doing now. But the biggest challenge is finding, say, a material engineer, a nuclear engineer, that will speak up on these issues when they know the facts, because most of them, they make their income in the industry one way or another, directly or indirectly. If they're at a university, they get funding from nuclear companies.
I get that. I understand that it's about their jobs and their money, but at what point do these people not be human beings? Like, I look at the people in St. Louis right now. St. Louis, in fact, is a dire situation. I'm sure you know about it. There's that Westlake landfill that's on fire, less than a quarter of a mile away from the nuclear dump site that was just dumped there near the St. Louis airport. And so the people in that community have gathered together when they realized they were living less than a mile away from this nuclear dump site that has been grossly mismanaged, sold to a private industry and grossly mismanaged, overseen by the EPA, who has neglected it. They are working now to get the Army Corps of Engineers actively engaged in that. But I fell off my chair last night when I was reading that Claire McCaskill, our senators, they've gathered together. What they're going to do is they're going to study the cancer rates. And in the meantime, they're telling these people living right next to this open nuclear dump site, who all of them, every single family is affected by the radiation, that we're gonna compile the data. We're going to study all the families who think they've been affected, and then we'll tell you maybe if the nuclear pollution has harmed your families. And in the meantime, there's no harm to human safety.
Yeah, they always say that. The problem there, whether it's the EPA or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, you have some employees that work there. They're good. You know, they know their stuff. They know the problems. But when it goes up the chain of command, up in the management chain, somewhere along the line, whether it's at the top or in the middle, is the problem. You know,
this is the issue.
There have been, you know, the over the years, people have been put in place at these agencies in management roles that, you know, do what they're told. All right, so, you know, it all comes from the top. You know, that's really what it boils down to. Now, sometimes these people that are really the decisions makers at the top, they believe what they're told by the nuclear industry. They surround themselves with advisors that are in the industry. So I don't feel we've really had a voice. And I know money's involved, but I don't really think that's a whole issue. When I was, you know, when I educate people, I mean, I spoke at the California Democratic Convention this year that they had in Anaheim.
Great.
And there was an environmental caucus. There were a couple hundred people there about. And, you know, when I told them that the waste was stored in these half-inch thick containers that couldn't be inspected, maintained, repaired, and when I told them that one canister contains more radiation, more cesium-137 than was released at Chernobyl, they had no idea. Absolutely no idea.
Right. Most people have.
So that information isn't getting to the people. And when I met with the governor's office, I met with the chief energy person in his office. He says, you know, we see the nuclear industry people here all the time. We never see you guys.
Huh.
You know, so you know, so that's part of the problem. But we can't go in with, you know, what we don't want, and we can't go in without having credible, documented information. And what I like to use is their information. I've got enough written evidence from the NRC and the nuclear industry and the DOE, written reports, their own information, and that's what I use. So what happens is when I make these presentations and when I provide this information, they can't win on that. You know, if I can get to them with this information, it proves credible. For example, at the California Coastal Commission, Edison wanted a permit to install one of these inferior systems right by the beach here.
Right.
5 miles from San Clemente. I worked with the Coastal Commission staff person. He knew nothing about all these issues. So I sent him all the links to the credible reports and everything. So I educated. I spent a lot of time with him, and he was very good to work with. And so when the Coastal Commission staff wrote their report, they included the information that these are not inspectable. Okay, and if they have any cracks, they can't be transported. I mean that was actually in the official documents from the Coastal Commission staff. So it wasn't Donna Gilmore or some environmental group up there saying this, you know, who you don't believe. It was in the staff report.
Right.
Unfortunately, the decision, Edison met with all these commissioners like the day before. I have no idea what they said to them. So what ended up coming out in the report is they approved the permit, but they put special conditions on it that said, well, you must show us within 20 years that you can inspect them and maintain them and that they'll be transportable, which is ludicrous. This is ludicrous. Yeah, this is crazy. So I, somewhere, and unfortunately, there were some influential groups that don't understand the issue with those canisters and were willing to endorse the system. And that's a big problem.
Why do you think that those groups were willing to endorse the system and not look?
Because they believe. One of them is the Union of Concerned Scientists, and Dave Lochbaum wrote a letter representing Union of Concerned Scientists endorsing the system because it was a below ground system. So he was looking at the terrorists, the lower risk from terrorists. And when our real terrorist risk is Mother Nature with these things that are going to corrode right by the beach, we'll be lucky to get 20 years. And so I wrote him after that because I know him, and he's very knowledgeable about a lot of things. And his overriding concern is he wants the fuel out of the pools. The pools are dangerous to keep the fuel in. If the water leaks out of the pools, you will have a major disaster, which I agree with him. The problem is he's willing to take anything. He's willing to take any kind of container just to get it out of the pools.
That's ridiculous.
And based on the evidence I have, with the pools, you have a chance of, if the water starts dropping, you have a chance to do something about it. They have provisions for that.
Yeah.
So there is a risk, but with the thin canisters, they have no way to stop these cracks. They have no way to see them, and they're gonna leak. And last week there was a 2-day NRC spent fuel management meeting. So all the experts were there. Anybody that's involved in overseeing or storing or building or selling or buying dry storage canisters and transport canisters was there. You have the manufacturers, Holtec, Areva. You have the nuclear industry lobby, NEI. You have NRC with all their experts, and they were making these presentations about how safe the dry storage is. And I called in and I said, but they admitted in this meeting that they have no way to inspect the canisters. So for them to say these are safely stored and then admit they haven't been able to inspect any of them.
That's not actually safe. That's not safe. They're not safe.
Right. That's the first obvious thing. So what Mark Lombard tells me, Mark Lombard is the director of Spent Fuel Management Division. He's like the top guy over anything at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to do with licensing, storage, and transport canisters has to go through his office. And he says, well, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out how to do this, So what? you just need to have faith, Donna, that before anything goes wrong, they'll figure it out.
Have faith with This is the most unconscionable statements I can even hear. Like, the things you said in the last 10 minutes are just have me knocked off my seats. First off...
Oh, I haven't. You have no idea. Then NEI made a presentation. They're the main nuclear industry lobby. They made a presentation talking about how safe they are. They referenced an NRC document done in 2007 that talked about the safety, and so I asked him. I said, "Well, can you provide any documents to back up all the quote unquote facts on your presentation?" Oh, well, it comes from here and there. But I go, just give me one, And, he just kind of wiggled out of that and didn't even commit to giving me anything.
Wow.
But I remembered the name of that document, the NRC document, was a probabilistic risk assessment. And I remember reading it. So before all the presentations were over, I asked another question, and I said, are you referring to this, new reg, blah, 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 blah document? And the NRC said, yes, that's the document they're relying on that says these canisters are so safe. We can get rid of emergency planning. We can get rid of the spent fuel pools. Nothing's going to go wrong. We don't have to notify the community. We can yank out all the radiation monitors. And this is what they're actually doing. They've done this at San Onofre. They've done it at Rancho Seco, Humboldt. The ones when they shut down, that's what they do. They haven't got rid of the pool yet at San Onofre. I'm fighting that, but and then I'm helping Zion in Illinois.
Wow.
On that, but anyway, that document that they're using as a reference, it excludes human error, any misloading of the canisters,
What?
any aging conditions that might happen to the material.
What?
On and on. Yeah.
Who? Yeah. How in their right minds? How do they judge? I mean, in the last 15 minutes, you said statements that are just how can the Union of Concerned Scientists say we're willing to put them anywhere? Anything is good enough then instead of waiting and putting them in something that actually works. And how can they actually say that the NRC approve a document that excludes human error or aging processes? Who makes those decisions? How do they come up with these ideas? Do we have any idea?
People, if you want to get promoted at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, you better play nice with the nuclear industry. The NRC commission is headed by 5 commissioners. They're appointed by the president. They're confirmed. They have to be confirmed by the Senate. And you normally get 4-to-1. You get 4 pro-industry and 1 safety-conscious commissioner. And everything is by majority vote on their decisions.
You know what's unconscionable about that is they should all be pro-safety, not just pro-nuclear. They should all be pro-safety. All of them ought to have safety as the number one. I mean, I have this saying that says, you can deny the harm that radiation causes, but radiation does not deny the harm it causes. I mean, it is harming people, and they keep denying it. This is what's infuriating me. Like, even at Zion, I know people that live in Illinois who have children who have mental disabilities, like are slow, and they live.
Well, one of the things you have to be careful about on the health things is there are so many things in our environment that damage our health. You can't just make a statement because somebody has a condition. You can't just automatically blame it on radiation.
That's what they count on.
And those are the kind of things that we as activists need to be aware of. We have enough evidence. We have enough hard, provable evidence. We can use their own information against them. We don't have to take on these other issues that we suspect or we believe in our gut or what's going on.
Yeah.
And we can lose our credibility if we do that. And once we say something that we can't back up with hard evidence, you lose whoever you're trying to reach.
I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So, it's one thing to have some discussion between activists, but when you're going out and you're trying to reach the general public and you're trying to reach the people in power that are determining our livelihood, our future, you need to go in with credible evidence, and it needs to be short and sweet.
So when you were at this meeting and you talked about this document, did they address these issues that it excluded the risk assessment, excluded human?
I would use the word crickets a lot. I asked a lot of questions, and if they were outdoors, you would have been able to hear crickets. It was so quiet.
They just don't answer.
They don't. Yeah. So that's one thing they do is they don't answer, and then they can cut off the phone line so you can't respond if they give you a bureaucratic BS that doesn't really answer your question.
Wow.
But I have to tell you this new one. Now, what exactly the big question is, what exactly is going to happen if one of these canisters cracks all the way through? That's the question, okay? Mm-hmm. And I have a letter that was written in 2000 from the chairman of the ACRS. The ACRS it's a let's see, how do I say this? ACRS? Yeah. They're an oversight to the NRC. They report directly to the commissioners, the 5 commissioners at the NRC, and their job is to make sure the NRC staff is doing their job. So they're kind of a technical oversight group. And the chairman of the ACRS wrote a letter to the NRC staff that said, your analysis of the consequences of water, I'm paraphrasing here, of water dropping below and exposing the spent fuel pool assumes there's going to only be a problem at high temperatures. And then he said with the high burn-up fuel, basically all the utilities are using now, this is fuel that they can burn longer in the reactor. The uranium pellets are designed so they can burn longer in the reactor before they have to take them out and put fresh fuel in. When they do that, they call it high burn-up fuel. It's over twice as radioactive.
Wow.
Over twice as thermally hot. And it's been shown to cause this zirconium protective cladding over the pellets to become brittle, and basically it can cause the cladding to fail. And when the zirconium cladding forms hydrides, and if those hydrides get to air at any temperature, you can have an explosion.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that is unconscionable. By the way, I just looked this up. ACRS is the acronym is Advisory Committee on Reactor Safety.
Yeah. Okay. And so I asked the question. When I was on the call, after all these presentations about how safe the waste is, I asked the question. I have this letter from the ACRS chairman that states this. I said, is there a report or has there been analysis done on the same situation in dry storage? Will we have an explosion? If you have a through-wall crack, air gets to that. Will we have an explosion?
Mm-hmm.
And they got really quiet. And then the moderator, Michelle Simpson, she is the manager over storage and transportation licensing. No dry storage system gets approved unless it goes through her desk. And her response to me was, Donna, there's nobody qualified in the room to answer your question.
What? They're the ones who are the people that are supposed. They're the experts, are they not? This is their deal. This is their industry.
I mean, you had EPRI there. EPRI is what does that stand for? Electric Power Research Institute, which is basically a consortium of utilities funds that, but the NRC uses it as a legitimate research.
So they
facility.
essentially just refuse to answer the question and say yes.
Exactly.
That's essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they do not want to tell the truth. And did these? Okay, so what happened with this process? Did they approve it? Is this part of something that we do all the time still?
What do you mean? The canisters?
Yeah, like these people know that they're. I'm a little bit of a loss for words. Forgive me here, but I am just completely overwhelmed with this information that we are knowingly putting excessively contaminated spent fuel in canisters that we know are going to leak, that we cannot inspect, that could, in theory, just blow up if they happen to crack all the way and they're exposed to air, correct?
What the NRC counts on and what the utilities count on is nothing's going to go wrong. They have themselves delusional, not based on any data, that nothing's going to go wrong. The vendor, Poltec, is one of the vendors that manufacture these inferior canister systems. He will, in presentations, claim, these will last 100 or 300 years. He's got this spiel that he puts out. So, if all our regulators and elected officials and are listening to is presentation by the salespeople or the vendors, this is what they're hearing,
Right.
They don't go any deeper than that.
Right.
And if they're using Union of Concerned Scientists as their source to double check their references, and if Union of Concerned Scientists happens to have made a decision, they're more concerned with the pools. That's what we get. That's what we get. Now, I have an email exchange going with David Lochbaum on this. I said, how could you endorse this system? And he's basically concerned about the pools. He said, well, they've been able to repair canisters in the past, but when I asked him for examples, he gave me an example of a thick cast that needed to have a seal replaced. I go, well, that's what I'm endorsing. I'm endorsing this 10 to 20 inch thick metal cast that have seals that are, it's a maintainable system.
Yeah.
So if something wears out, if it's set up, you can replace it. You get an early warning before there's a radiation release, so you have time to deal with it.
Right.
That's what I'm endorsing. So that example didn't work. And his other example was of a thin carbon steel canister that they repaired. Well, carbon steel, number one, doesn't have stress corrosion cracks. That's a degradation phenomena strictly with stainless steel. So carbon steel doesn't do that. Plus, there was no fuel inside that canister they repaired.
Oh my gosh! And
those were his only examples he gave me.
And has he not retracted? Is he not beginning to rethink his position on this? Or
he's not changing his position. And I think one of his fears is that we wouldn't be able to get the utilities to even pick better casts. And he's not convinced that the thick ones are any better than the thin ones. And I've sent him documents, scientific and other documents about the stress corrosion cracking. There's a covert, because these haven't been in service long enough to actually have leaked yet. It's still such an immature technology.
Yeah.
They don't have any operational data to prove that they're going to do that. They have all, but so what the NRC did, it says, well, let's take a look at other containers and other components that are similar to these canisters. They're made out of the same kind of stainless steel. They're manufactured the same way. They have welds. Let's look at what's failed at nuclear plants,
Uh-huh.
And one example they came up with is a Cobalt nuclear plant in South Africa. It had a tank. It's manufactured the same way, same materials as these thin canisters. It had a through-wall crack in 17 years.
Wow.
And it was thicker, and it's thicker than our canisters. The majority of the canisters in the United States are 0.5 inches, a half an inch. The Coburg, the thickest crack, there were numerous cracks in the Coburg tank. The thickest one was 0.61 inches.
I just find this, I cannot understand how any real concerned scientist could actually say, we're going to put the most contaminated, the most toxic substance that we have ever created in a storage container that we know is going to crack in 20 years and say, well, we know that, let's hope it works, and in the meantime, we can probably come up with something better. That's just, when there's a really good, great, viable option that you have actually found. It wasn't the NRC bringing this to them. You're the person who actually brought this information so we can upgrade our nuclear safety in our country.
What we've done instead is we've downgraded it. For example, North Anna in Virginia, they used to use the thick casts, okay? They have since, for the new ones they bought, they've gone to the less expensive ones, the thin canisters. So what we have going on in the United States is a trend to go from safer to less safe because of the dollars. It's all about the money. And because the NRC is what's called a capture organization, that's run by, 4 out of 5 commissioners being pro-nuke, for whatever reason they believe all this stuff, or they have magical thinking that everything's going to work fine. I doubt you could go very high up in management at the NRC unless you supported the nuclear industry.
Dr. Alvin Weinberg called themselves the nuclear priesthood. He wrote an article on this, and I think it was 1972, and said, we have now entered into a phase where we have a nuclear priesthood who is guarding the safety of the planet. And they have pretty much failed. If they're the nuclear priesthood, they have pretty much seriously failed. So, look, Donna, I want to ask you about something, though, here, because I watched a hearing with Senator Barbara Boxer last week. It was a C-SPAN hearing, and I could not believe it, and I don't know if you know about this, but at this hearing, she was questioning the NRC commissioner. Evidently, the San Onofre nuclear power plant petitioned the NRC to allow them to not have a safety plan for the spent in case an emergency happened. They're not required to have a community, and the NRC approved this. Do you know about this?
Yes, I do know about this. Now, at the time, Barbara Boxer was the chairman of the the energy. I forget the particular of what she was. But she was an oversight. Senate Oversight Committee for the oversight
energy
for the
and
Senate.
Energy
but
and
she's only, she's only one person. Okay, she's on the right side of this, but she has a podium where she can speak, but there's a limit to the authority she has. Right. I mean, we need more senators that get it. We need to start voting in elected officials into our Senate that are on the right side of these issues. At first, they have to be educated about them. Right. So we need to give to our federal senators and educate them about this, and we need to do it in a way that's credible. Right. All right, but there's not very many like her, unfortunately.
No, in fact,
even Democrats. It's not. True. It's not a Republican thing, or the Democrats. Most of them are on board with all this stuff. I mean, it's one thing to be, if they still think we need nuclear energy because of global warming, all this stuff. Even if they're still at that point in their head, right. When it comes to the nuclear waste storage, there shouldn't be a disagreement on this part.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So to me,
even the emergency plan. The head of the NRC looked Barbara Boxer right in the face and said to her, "Well, we approved it because all of our other emergency plans are for operating nuclear power plants, and this one's closed down, so we felt it was too heavy of a burden for the licensee." Her mouth fell open. It was just like unconscionable. I mean, this just happened this past October. When she called.
Well, the document that they're using, and I think they wrote a letter to Senator Feinstein, because this was one thing where she was on our side about the emergency planning, and they wrote a letter to her, and in the letter they referenced the fact that there was never going to be any loading areas or whatever anyway, and so based on that letter, I did the research and found the document that they were using as the basis for saying the dry storage would be safe. Okay, so I already knew that. So when I listened to that meeting last week, that's how I knew about that document, because I'd already done the research way before that. So, we need to have more people getting educated on this and knowing how to, reach the right ones. I'm working with activists in Illinois, and we'll see how far we get there. I mean, they've got how many nuclear reactors? I mean, Illinois has more nuclear reactors than any other state. Exactly. And it's very, it's a very pro-nuclear environment there. So,
Very. And those people, if you talk to the citizens there, they actually think that they need the nuclear power. They are like, if we don't have it, we're going to run out of electricity in the winter. Like, they seriously will say that to you.
Well, I don't think anybody has. I mean, we were told the same thing here. When I got involved with the San Onofre, the few activists that were fighting the plant when it was running, they were arguing about what percent of the energy of electricity, what percent of the energy San Onofre provided. You know, they were arguing over, was it this percent or this percent? Mm-hmm. And I told the activists, I said, no, that's the wrong framing. It's very important that you frame your message correctly. You're falling into the nuclear industry framing. I said, the question is not what percent they provide, but what percent do they need to provide? And right. The answer is 0.
Right. There you go.
So it's very important not to fall in their framing. But if you're going to make a claim that it's 0, you better have your facts to back it up.
Right. Okay, so for example, here in the Northwest, we're working to close down the Columbia Generating Station. There's many efforts to have that. Now, Patty Murray in Washington, who's the senator of that state, very, very, very pro-nuclear. Her dad worked at Hanford. She was the person who really got the legislation going to make Hanford a national monument, which has now been declared a national monument. But
Well, wait a minute. Hanford, you're talking about the nuclear waste is declared a national monument there, yes. The site?
Yes.
A monument to disaster? Is that what we're making monument?
It's
called a monument to potential global destruction? Is that?
Is this the first you've heard of it? It's called Hanford Ridge National Monument. It just happened within the last few months. They actually passed this, and there is some conversation, and honestly, I have not had the time to dig into it.
Wait a minute. Has Obama signed this? Is this legislation he signed?
Yes. It recently passed through they actually call Hanford now a national monument. Yes. Yes.
Oh, I would be interested if you could send me some kind of link on that.
I definitely will.
I mean, you're ready to poison your water supply up there. So, but in terms of Columbia, that's just one plant. Now, people can't believe that.
Coming back to this is what's happened what you're saying, because we often say up here in the Northwest when we reach out to these legislators, it only actually provides less than 4% of the energy to the area. So what you're saying is what we really need to do is find out how much energy, like, for example, you found there was 40% excess energy. We need to find out how much does it actually need to supply. Instead of saying it only supplies 4%, if we could prove that we don't need it at all by maybe
that should be pretty easy to do. You have 2 issues you have to worry about. Number one is you need to look at the pocket that it's in, the transmission pocket, to see if there's you have transmission lines that go to different areas, and your electricity comes in over those transmission lines.
Right.
And you have different areas that have transmission lines coming into them, so you have to make sure that there's enough transmission coming in. But 4%, my gosh, that's fixable. And you guys have so much hydro up there.
Yes.
The only argument they probably would have to try and keep that open is to claim, well, we'd have to use gas or coal because of global warming or something like that. But I haven't researched yours, but don't you guys export? I think we get electricity from the north.
Yes, there is an export. And that's the point here, is like maybe what you're saying, and this is my takeaway from this fabulous interview this morning, thank you so much, is that really we need to kind of maybe perhaps reframe and find out dig a little deeper into how much energy there is, and besides the 4% that we know is a known fact, but dig into how much energy there actually is. Maybe there's an excess of energy. If we're selling it down south, perhaps it means that we really have an excess of energy.
I have no doubt that, I mean, what happens when they shut that down for refueling?
Nothing. Like, doesn't skip a beat. I mean, they don't tell us.
Right. Yeah, no, there's 4%. I mean, geez, that's nothing. But what you need to, now, if you can get access to whoever manages the grid, the transmission grid, I'm not talking about the utility companies, but there's someone that manages the grid to make sure as demand goes up and down, that they make sure there's enough electricity coming into that area to keep everything running.
Right.
That group whoever runs that, at least in California, is more independent, and they give the honest information. So you can get a hold of that report. Down here in California, I looked at the 10-year plan for California, and I read I didn't read the whole thing. I skimmed through it because I only cared about the nuclear part of it. But it's a 500-page report that I just, did searches and that's where I found the evidence. Because they have to have a backup plan. If Columbia goes down, they have to have a backup plan for that 4% anyway. So usually in that report, or even in PowerPoint presentations that they give to the administration, the state administration, that's a good place to look for the evidence. So I don't know if they hide things up there or if they're open.
Well, I can tell you this: when we get off the air, I'm going to do some research. If I need some help, I hope you've let me call you, because I think this might be the crack. That might be a way for us to move forward, because we're hitting walls, because the Columbia Generating Station is set up so there are 59 stakeholders involved. And so we really have to get all of those 59 stakeholders to say, okay, we're going to think about shutting it down.
They care about the money,
right.
That's the difference. But and some of those are out of state too,
right.
So
right.
That's a challenge there. We should probably talk about some strategy, offline and kick this around. We'll see what we could come up with. But the public there, I think your city councils, I would go to the city councils and the states and the federal elected officials, regulators, and educate them on this. Once you have the facts, you have it documented, and you can if you go to city council, I'm assuming you don't have a big budget. We would, for San Onofre, we would get resolutions passed at the city council. We'd basically get them to write letters about whatever action we wanted them to take. But we came with our presentations, with handouts, where we had documented facts that were credible.
Right.
If your transmission grid report says it's excess, it's a little more credible. And that was very effective. And if you can get city councils to pass resolution, you can get some free press. Okay? If a mayor or a city makes a resolution, you can get some free press out of that. And so anybody that's reading the newspapers or that's a good way to get some free, it's kind of a way to do PR. Plus their network. If they're in a city council, they're in the political realm, and those city council people are the ones that are probably going to be running for the next higher office. So you have that. Now, the downside is a lot of these people, they take money from the utilities, the nuclear industry for their election, and if you go against them, they can also put their money into getting you defeated.
So let me ask you this about the utilities. This is a little piece of the pie. I don't know if we have enough time. We only have about 5 or 6 minutes. But these utilities, they all seem to be extremely committed to nuclear. The thought of shutting down a nuclear power plant to them is like, nails on a chalkboard. And I don't understand that when it does not actually provide a major source. I mean, how is it that our utility boards are 100% committed to nuclear? I mean, do you understand? Do they make money from it? Or do they believe what they're being told, that it's critical? What actually Yeah, I hear what your answer says is essentially it is up to us to go to these utility board members and educate them with the facts, real credible facts that we know about.
Yeah, but now, I don't know who's running your utility boards. I don't know are these elected people or appointed?
The utility boards, they are elected. Like I have a utility board member here in Eugene that is a board member on eWeb, and eWeb is a member of Columbia Generating Station, and it is all. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So
you need to kind of size up. I mean, some of these people are a lost cause, and some of them aren't. So it just depends on what's motivating them.
Well, I think, the fact that they don't return my phone calls and don't answer the phone, I think that means they're a lost cause. Might be a lost cause.
Yeah, well, could be. So then if they're elected, then you really need to get to the city council.
Get them out.
And go to venues where you're educating, and you have to give people some action items. So that guy's coming up for re-election.
Yes.
They may be a target, but that may or may not be the best place to put your limited time and energy. We really need to kind of probably take more time to talk about this offline. Now another thing is there may be some influential people in your state that have some influence over this, or maybe it's in Washington, right?
Yes, it is actually in Washington, and I'm in Oregon.
Yeah. So that, the other thing, in California, we have the option to set up, well, I think it's already municipal, isn't it? Utility district.
Yes.
Because it's elected. So you already have that. Unfortunately, you have owners outside of the state. That's part of the problem.
Right.
You also have Bill Gates there, who is so pro-nuclear.
Right.
So with Microsoft. So, and I wonder if the people that do have money and influence in Washington, maybe there's some of them that are approachable if they knew the truth and might have some political clout.
Yes.
That's the other thing.
There is a lot of work to be done on this one, that is for sure. And I think part of it is those of us, probably just like you, like we're citizen activists, and actually most of us, and I know like for myself, many people never really paid attention to this until Fukushima happened, until we started going, wait a minute, like, why aren't we, we started asking questions, why aren't we being informed? And I don't know how you feel, but I'm a little bit angry about the fact that it's up to us citizens to hold these people, to make them do the right thing.
But okay, here's the thing. I used to tell my staff this all the time because, there's a lot of stuff to be angry about here. So you can either spend your energy and time being angry or because of the way things are, or you can use your time and energy to say, okay, this is how things are. How am I going to win given how things are?
That is so awesome. Thank you for that. That is actually exactly right. That's exactly the attitude that we need to have. And we need to, we have 1 minute left, and that's a perfect way to end this show. I want to thank you, Donna, for your really thoughtful conversation and the really professional attitude you bring to the activism, the citizen journalists here. I think you're a really awesome role model. I want to invite you back here. Let me just tell you publicly, you are welcome to come on my radio show anytime you want. The hour is yours. So,
well, I think the main thing here is people want to learn more. Go to sanonofresafety.org because most of this information is at sanonofresafety.org. It's called San Onofre, but really it's a national website. Is that and a lot of the information I have here, all the evidence that people need, sample handouts, all that kind of stuff is on the website. I have a video from a Holtec vendor.
Well, we've got 10 seconds left here. So, look, do go to sanonofre.org. Thank you, Donna.
San Onofre Safety.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.